Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Horse's Mouth Live, the Extraordinary Advisor Show, where I bring guests to help you in every area of your life, especially your business. And the topic today is so interesting to me, and it's how do you build trust and credibility in really conscious, deliberate ways with your clients. I know the advisors I work with and that I've spoken to always say, like, of course my clients trust me, or I want to be their trusted advisor. Sometimes even people put that on their website, which sometimes I think is, you shouldn't have to say you're a trusted advisor. But how do you communicate that? And what are ways that you can be more deliberate with this? And I don't think most advisors think about that. Like, how can I be deliberately building ways I communicate with my clients or processes in my office that have people feeling trust without me saying I'm your trusted advisor. And we have such a great expert today. We have Holly Buchanan, and Holly and I met a bunch of years ago. We were both speaking at a conference, and she's a fabulous presenter. I've seen her speak many times. We've been on shared stages together, virtual stages, very recently. And I want to give you a little bit about her background if you haven't seen her at a conference you've been at. Holly Buchanan is a very popular speaker at conferences and meetings. She's a trainer and an author, super smart. Buchanan Marketing works with financial companies and professionals who want to be more successful in understanding how their clients make financial decisions, how they buy products, and how they choose advisors. She is also an expert on selling financial services to women, what men need to know, and women will be surprised to learn. And her research, we've had her on the show before to talk about communications, and her recent research on what are advisors doing that are either hurting relationships or what makes clients actually decide to hire you is fascinating. So Holly, thank you so much for being on the show.
I'm delighted to be here. We always have a good time, Ellen, so it's great.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do for sure. So you found in your research that advisors overrate themselves in terms of how satisfied their clients are. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we all think that we're really good at what we do, and that's largely true. But there is sometimes a disconnect between how we see ourselves and how our clients see us. And clients aren't always forthright about sharing that. Like my expertise is, what does it look like from the client side of the desk? I spend time with clients talking to them, why did you choose your advisor? What do you like about him or her? What don't you like? Why did you fire your advisor? And the number of times I say, did you share that information with your advisor? And they said, no, it's kind of shocking. So even if you're doing a very good job, there's always room for improvement. But it comes back to, I think that disconnect is your clients aren't always going to be forthright, especially trust and credibility are won and lost in small moments. So a lot of times we miss what's actually happening.
Do you think clients are conscious of that? Because sometimes there is something that happened where you said something and it rubbed them the wrong way. But if you said that it's won and lost in really small ways, do you think that they're not communicating this with advisors because they're not even totally aware of what changed?
It is, yeah. Because I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, Joe, very successful business owner, like he's just killing it. And so one of his colleagues said, Joe, like you're at a whole new level financially. You need a new financial advisor. And that colleague recommended his advisor. So Joe took the meeting and I asked, and he decided to go with that advisor. And I said, Joe, what made you decide to work with the advisor? And he had to really think about it. He said, the first impression wasn't great because this advisor was kind of an alpha male, the fancy suit and tie. And like, that is so not Joe. That's not how he rolls. So, he kind of stereotyped the advisor. But Joe said, we were walking down the hallway and he saw a crumpled up piece of paper next to the waste paper basket. And he stopped and picked it up and put it in the basket. And jokes, he had to think about it. He said, that sent me the message. He wasn't waiting for his staff to clean up, and that he paid attention to a detail. So like Joe's a really super smart, self-aware guy, but he had to think about it. But he was like, yeah, I could tell you the exact number. Something as little as that, where not a great first impression, but the advisor, and I'm sure that, and I'm not saying that advisors should have crumpled up paper next to your waste paper baskets, but it's just an example of sometimes a small thing can have a big effect.
It's interesting to me in that story, because you'd think the first impression was this guy's professional, all suited up. I bet his office is meticulous. And for some clients, that would be a great first impression, but not for all clients. So what do you think advisors need to know, or how do they tell if they're winning or losing trust with clients, if a lot of things are that either unconscious or small?
Well, a couple of suggestions on that. One is a lot of advisors have a team around you. And if your team are involved in any of your client communications or meetings in any way, I'm a big fan of, and specifically like right after a meeting or interaction, just checking in with team members and saying, was there anything I could have done better? Like if you were me, when you're asking for feedback, I think it's really important to ask for something specific. Like, hey, do I do a good job? Do my clients trust me? Like not a great, people would struggle with that. But after a meeting, like sometimes people can pick up on body language. Like it happened to me. I was in a meeting with a colleague and with a Fortune 500 company and around the conference table. And afterwards, my colleague was like, that reading was great. We're going to get the business. And I said, are you open to some feedback? I said, I think I picked up on something. And he was like, okay. And I said, I don't think the marketing manager is on board. And he was like, she's totally on board. I'm like, did you see the body language? Like, and so to his credit, he's like, well, why don't you circle back privately with the marketing manager? And she was not on board and would have torpedoed the project. But because we had that open relationship, so I think sometimes your staff can pick up on stuff. So that's just one example. And the other thing is people don't like giving feedback because if it's not good, the person could have a bad reaction and push back against you, especially if it's someone superior to you in rank. So I'm also a fan of just asking for advice for their opinion. Like, hey, do you have any advice for me? I mean, we have these wonderful forums like we're in now where advisors can ask each other and say, hey, I was in this situation. If you were me, what would you have done? How would you have handled it? So really take advantage of that to get different perspectives.
What I love about asking for, is there anything I could have done better in that, is that the advisor would be modeling to his or her team that this is how we roll. We want to get better all the time. That their opinion matters, even if there's someone working for you. And it made me think one of the coaches, mentors I had years ago said when she does interviews like this, she'll always ask at the end, is there anything I could have done better? And I do that now when I'm being interviewed or if I've spoken somewhere. And sometimes I learn things that I never even knew were important. And otherwise, and sometimes they're like, no, it was awesome. And then I, feel good about it. But either way, it shows that I care about it. So I love that for so many reasons, for asking for that from your team. You've talked about trust and credibility. Like maybe you could talk about the difference between those and the roles they play in working with clients.
Yeah, there are two sides of the same coin. Credibility is, do you know what you're doing? Do you have expertise? And when you look at different personality types, there is that more type A, a lot of executives, they're like, just get to the facts. and they're all about opportunities. And they're problematic because they think, I can invest myself, like I can pick stocks. So when you're talking with them and winning credibility, you have to be able to demonstrate there are opportunities I can bring to you that you might not know about. Like, here's expertise that I have, that you might not have. So credibility is really, do you know what you're doing? An example of that would be, like, I was talking with a young female advisor about how she runs credibility. And I just polled the room. I'm like, how many of you have ever been asked, how long have you been doing this? And, hands went up all over the place. And I'm like, what are people really asking? Like, what do you think? If someone said that to you, what do you think they were asking? What are they really asking?
Do you know what you're doing?
Do you know what you're doing? And so I say, come prepared with something other than just a number. So what this advisor shared, she said, I have a special needs son. And she said, I have mastered the legal system around this, the special financial issues that we face. And one of her target markets is families with special need kids. So this is a way she can get around, she's young, she's female, hasn't been in the business long, but this is some expertise that can win her credibility with her market. So that's like a credibility issue. A trust issue is more, are you going to do the right thing for me? This is where they really have to know, like the number of clients I talk to who still don't know how their advisor gets paid. And that goes to that, conflict of interest. Like, is the advice you're giving me in my best interest? And trust is also, do I like you? Like, do I see you as a human being? Like, for example, I was doing training for some long-term care insurance salespeople. And there's a guy at the back of the room. And he, the young guys were at the back of the room, kind of yucking it up. So I'm like, I'm going to walk back and have a little bit of fun with them. But there's this one young African-American gentleman. And I said to him, so why did you get into the business of long-term care insurance sales? And I'm expecting, unlimited earning potential, or I get to be my own boss at my own hours. But he said, I was raised by my grandmother, and she was my rock. And we found out after she died that she had been abused in her nursing home. And it is my mission to make sure that never happens to anyone else's grandmother. And I was like, wow, shame on me for stereotyping you. But he went from insurance salesman to caring human being. So the amount of trust he won, which is that one story, could absolutely make the difference whether someone works with him or not.
So is that something you recommend, Holly, is that people tell their personal story, or how do you consciously and deliberately do things to help build trust, like in that story you just told?
Yeah, and I refer to Mitch Anthony a lot. I'm sure you're familiar with Mitch Anthony, but his advice I think is really good, which is basically you start with, if it is a meeting, you start with the customer story, of course, and the majority of the time is spent on them. But before you go into your process, you can say, would it be okay if I took a couple of minutes to share some information, my story, to tell you a little bit about me? So that's a great place to have that, that kind of a story. The other thing about like really being deliberate, I'm using your word, Ellen, being deliberate about how can you build things in, and what are some of the trust and credibility killers? Like, I know when I was 4, I had meningitis and I lost most of the hearing in my right ear. And so apparently I talked to the left ear, my good ear. I talked out of the left side of my mouth. I had no idea that I did that until I started public speaking. And so when I'm presenting, I share that story to get ahead of what might be a credibility issue for me, because people are like, why is Holly talking out of the left side of her mouth? That looks kind of fun. So it's about being deliberate about what might hurt trust or credibility, getting rid of that, and what can you add in?
So I know in the past when I've heard you speak, you talk about things that hurt credibility and trust, that things people, advisors say. So like you do some shifting around, like should say this instead of that. Can you give us some examples of those?
Yeah, 'cause I have a series called Ask This, Not That, and Say This, Not That. And it's pretty common things that we all say, and it has an unintentional effect on your client. One is sometimes clients will be asking a lot of questions. And it is that more deliberate decision-making style. And it often it's women, but it could be a man too. But they something to the effect of, I'm sorry for asking so many questions. And a common response is, there are no stupid questions. And I see people go, they're not asking permission. They're not saying, I'm sorry. They're asking permission to say, is it okay? Like, I'm worried I'm taking up your time, but they may not think their question is stupid. So like, just get rid of there are no stupid questions. But if someone is asking a lot of questions, it's just really powerful to say, I love questions. Like I worked with a guy, Ethan, on this. He was doing a financial education seminar, and I can talk more about the story, but he did one Tuesday night and one Thursday night. And Tuesday night, he got some response. But Thursday night, we fixed some of his credibility killers. And one of those was when the audience apologized, I'd like, repeat after me. Your mantra is going to be, I love questions. That's why I'm here. And he was so good Thursday night, welcoming the questions. And even he was like, do some of you, would you like to know what a mutual fund is? Because we think everybody knows what a mutual fund is. But some people were like, actually, yeah. He's like, great. And he was just so open to it. So he sent the message, I'm trustworthy. I'm not going to call you stupid. So that's one. Another very common one, and I really struggle with this one, is you've just explained something and you say, does that make sense? What's the message you're saying? You're patting yourself on the back. Yeah, did I do a good job of explaining that? Yeah. And so people pick up on that. Like, how many people have raised their hand, said, no, I'm a complete idiot. You did a terrible job of explaining that. I didn't get it at all, right? Never happened. So I'm a big fan of, when you're explaining things, do it in a chunk and just pause and say, what are your thoughts? I'm going to pause for a moment, because you'll see the thought bubble. Like sometimes they say, are there any questions? And you'll see them go, no, that's okay. Keep going. But there's a thought bubble there. So just pause and say, I just want to pause. What are your thoughts? To get that thought bubble, you want to know what's going on in your head.
That's great. And from a communication standpoint, it also allows them, if you don't do that, then you're going to be on to the next thing. And they're thinking like, I'm not sure if that makes sense for me, or I don't understand that. And they're not going to track with whatever else you want to share with them. So I love that. We talked before the show got started about how there are still the need to have conversations about how to talk to women clients, which both of us have been doing this a very long time. It's infuriating to me. Like, why are we still talking about that? It's so ridiculous. But it goes to sometimes, well, we all have unconscious bias about lots of things. It's unconscious. And can you share some examples of ways that advisors are still saying things that are putting off their female clients?
Yeah, and I do want to acknowledge that, we are in a different area, that advisors want to do a good job. They want to work with women and do a great job of serving them. And, the smart advisors know, like the boomer women are going to end up with all the money. Like they're inheriting from the last generation that has money. They're outliving their husbands. All the money goes to them. They're divorcing, getting half. They're earning more money than ever. So there's a huge, I've seen a huge shift in saying we want to do a good job with women. I think some of it is just we're kind of trained, like if you have business just with the man and you want to bring the woman into the process, the typical thing that you say is, what if something happened to you? Would she know what to do? And while that may be effective with the man, it sends the message to the woman, you are so unimportant. He would have to die for us to actually value having you as part of this process. So, I'm a big fan of just saying, these are financial decisions that affect your family every day. And, you are absolutely necessary in these meetings. I do want to acknowledge that sometimes second marriages, people are keeping accounts more separate. But I do think that there's a way, even if you're not going into the numbers, to have that meeting with all the people just to talk about how, because our money affects all of our decisions, and just to make them feel important.
Yeah. I love that. And to be really clear and wanting them there, because I'm also thinking that question of, if something happens to him, will you know what to do? Infers that he's the keeper of all the financial information. And in lots of the clients, when I was working with individual clients, more times than not with my clients, the woman was the one who had all the financial information. He would have been the one that would have no idea what would happen if something happened to her. So this not making assumptions is, of course, really important. Are there certain questions that advisors can ask in their meetings with clients that help to build trust and credibility?
There are, but I actually want to talk to you first, Ellen, about and ask that question of you, because you do a lot of really great things, how you set your meetings up and some of the questions that you ask. Would you mind sharing first? Because I think you do some amazing things.
Are you
like setting the intention?
Oh yeah. So
and some of the questions that you ask about, yeah.
So I think this is where I thought you were going with this question, Holly. Before I do, either if I'm on a panel with someone or before all these interviews that I do on Horse's Mouth Live, I always ask, like, what's your intention for this? And I have very generous people on as guests. So they're never like, oh, that I get 20 new clients. Like, it's never that. Of course, they're wanting to share their expertise, but it helps set the stage for how you want things to go. And one of the things when I'm advising advisors about how to run meetings is also to, like, what is your intention? What's your intention from this call that you have or the Zoom meeting? There's an agenda that's often set, but it's great to know what do you really want to have come out of this for to move the client ahead or for you, and what do you think their intention might be? So I love to ask or to suggest to people that they ask what their objective is for the meeting as well, because I think sometimes, especially super organized advisors, can come in with their agenda, and that's awesome. But it doesn't leave room for the clients to have one as well. So,
yeah, because one of and I'll share some ideas and questions. But in one of our conversations, you talked about uncovering a triggering event. Was there a money event in the last 6 months you wish you had handled differently? Like, I love that question.
Yeah, so let's give Preston Cherry the benefit of
that.
That is his question.
Dr. Cherry's question?
Yes,
okay.
We were all on, so I don't want to take his thought leadership.
Okay. Yeah,
but it is a great question. Repeat it again. I cut you off a little bit. So
was there a money event in the last 6 months you wish you had handled differently? It's just so powerful. Yeah, Dr. Preston Cherry is also another brilliant colleague of ours. And the other question, I think it was from you, is 2 years from now, what does success look like? Is that your question?
Yeah. And I did that when I was working with individual clients. And now when I'm working one-on-one with, business owners or advisors, I like to ask that for a few reasons. It's both, if our relationship was great, how would you know, and what would it look like? But it's also to understand where they're at now and where they want to go, just to make sure you're the right fit for them and that you can absolutely help. Because I imagine, and you're the expert on this, Holly, that when you're saying you can do something that you have no expertise in, like, that's not a very good credibility builder, and people will get that. I think that people have senses, their spidey senses go up, even if it's not conscious. When you're saying something that you don't believe, they hear that you don't believe it. Do you have some feedback about that?
Oh, absolutely. I talk about, speaking with conviction and the importance of slowing down, especially if you're making an important point. You think about Martin Luther King. It's not, I have a dream. It's like, I have a dream. No, President Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you. When you have that conviction, and you don't have to, I mean, it's creepy to speak that slow all the time, but when you're reaching an important point, you come across with more confidence. If you talk really quickly, and you're like, but I have so many great things to share, and I just know they're going to do business with me if I could share all my ratings, my expertise, and all the happy clients I have, and you're talking really quickly, and you can come across as insecure. Mm. So I'm a big fan of slow down. Also, a willingness to go with the client. We talked about say this, not that, ask this, not that. When people say, how are you? Is there a more totally useless question right now? I mean, does anyone know how to answer that question? I mean, do you lie and say, fine? It's a really difficult question. So I'm a big fan of starting with, what's going on in your world? Like if it's an existing client, hey, any changes that have happened? Are there any big decisions coming up? If you just, what's on your mind today? Like if you're, when you're coming in here today, what's on your mind? Is there anything you're concerned about? Those are all much better questions than how are you? And to your point, Ellen, it lets them kind of start with their agenda. Because if something is on their mind, that thought bubble, you want to get that out.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Holly, this is such great information. I love how tactical and practical you are with this. And I really appreciate the conversation about how do we be more conscious and deliberate in building those relationships we know we want to have to serve our clients the best. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
So if people want to connect with you to learn more, if they're bringing in speakers for conferences or want to learn more about the work that you do, where would be a good place to find you?
HollyBuchanan.com. So it is HOLLY, B as in boy, UCHANAN.com. It's got my speaker information. You can send me an email. You can also find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And I love feedback. And as you can tell, I am a gatherer of stories. So I'm always very interested to hear from advisors and their teams on what are you running into? What are your concerns, especially right now in such a volatile world? I'd love to hear from you.
Great, good. And just feedback, you're awesome today. So thank you.
So are you. Thank you for setting a positive intention for today. I really like that.
And for all of you watching and listening, whether you're watching live or the recording, thank you so much for being here with us. Again, my name is Ellen Rogin. You can find out more about me at ellenrogin.com. That's ROGIN. And if you go to ellenrogin.com/horse's mouth, you can download my special report, What Extraordinary Advisors Know That Others Don't. And so the question to ponder today is, how big of a positive impact are you willing to make, and how are you deliberately building trust and credibility with your clients? And remember, be great and create great every single day.